And welcome to another episode of Patriots Fourth and Two. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me as always is Steve Balestrieri. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Matthew Judon trade to the Atlanta Falcons, as well as the second preseason game for the Patriots, which they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles at home, 14-13. So we have a lot to talk about, a lot of different layers to the game, both kind of inside and outside of those game lines from last night that have some kind of trickle down effect. But before we get into all that, Steve, how are we doing today?
We're doing. It was good to see football again. I mean, Patriots playing at home against a much better opponent this week. There was some good stuff. There was some not so good stuff. True. But, that's what preseason's for, right?
Absolutely.
Trying to work things out. And especially, we know, and we've been talking about it here, for several months, it's a rebuild. So they have a lot of things to get settled. And that's what these games are for. And, I thought between the joint practice and the game last evening, I thought they accomplished quite a bit.
I totally agree with you. And, I think between the training camp practices, which are so beneficial, and so many of the coaches like them for a lot of good reasons. And you and I have witnessed it in the past. I mean, they can put themselves in certain situations. The Nick Sirianni might tell Drake Maye, hey, what do you want to work on? Oh, we really need to work on our third and long, or we really need to work on our red zone, offense, or whatever the situation is. And, they'll kind of come up with a plan to kind of put, their team in positions where they feel like they're deficient in order to kind of get some opportunities. And then sometimes in these games, there's no scheme, Steve. They're still running actual plays, but they're not like scheming things up a whole lot. It's really more about getting guys opportunities to not only try to make their roster and show what they can do for that team, but also put things on film for themselves if another team is looking to pick them up.
Absolutely. And Sirianni had a lot of great things to say about Drake Maye and the joint practice. And he told Mayo right after the game that, the one-day joint practice thing to him was a huge success, and he wants to do it again next year. So
it sounds like they have a pretty good relationship.
Yeah, and he told the media, we got to. I think I have the quote right here. But he was talking about, that.
Well, while you're finding that, I mean, I would just say that, obviously, it's kind of funny, kind of not funny, but. There was a lot of talk about how much the Patriots were struggling. And I'm like, well, you're talking about a top 4 or 5 team going against a bottom 4 or 5 team. So, there's going to be a big talent disparity. And it showed on the field. And it kind of showed, I think, a lot of fans and media members like, hey, there's a lot of work to do here. But we knew that going into it. I was a little disappointed with how poorly some players, and some position groups handled the week. Just given, you're kind of hoping that when you face someone or a team rather that's significantly better from a talent perspective than you are, that maybe it helps guys kind of rise to the occasion, and you see it. And I think in some cases you did, in some cases you didn't. Did you find the quote?
Yeah, he said so. So, man, I was really pleased, and I would love to do this again. I said to Coach Mayo after the game, I said, let's do this again next year. I said to him, because of all the great work, really good work, and, you can get good work in against different teams, different schemes, different players, and you're not going against the same person all the time. 89 plays is a good chunk of work. And he said later, because of how long the practice went, and they, played 89 plays during this practice, he said that's why he ended up keeping a lot of the starters out, because he didn't think it was enough time for them to recover, just 2 days after playing that much.
Right.
But, he was really I think, really positive about the whole experience.
Yeah.
So,
It
you know,
seems
and
like
that's
both coaches were
great
happy with
because
it.
that's what you want to see, you know, out of joint practices. You don't want to see teams getting so physical to the point of fighting and all that.
Well, remember that Panthers one from a couple of years ago we've talked about in the past. I mean, that was totally counterproductive. I mean, and we saw, what was it? Was it Rams Giants? What was there's
Yeah.
the guy who pushed the assistant coach on the other team. I'm like, man, that's
Yeah.
ugly.
Yeah. That's when you're getting
No.
you're getting beyond the pale at that point. You
Oh
know.
yeah. I mean, look, and guys are competing for jobs. It's hot. You know, they're under pressure, and you know the testosterone is gonna play a factor. I mean, all those things are just natural. So, you know, but anyway, I thought it was a very cool opportunity for the Patriots. A lot of young guys to face. You know, it's good for them to face that level of talent. Having Christian Gonzalez go up against AJ Brown, you know, one of the best receivers in the league. You know, AJ Brown very complimentary of Christian Gonzalez, and I think that, you know, I think that Christian Gonzalez has gotten some flack for maybe not being as locked down in coverage as he was maybe as a rookie, but it's early. He's coming back from injury. I don't think that's an overly big surprise. But you know, I think that, you know, the Patriots. I think the biggest thing with certainly the joint practice and even a little bit into the game was the offensive line needs some work. Okay, so let's put a pin. Let's put a pin in that though when we get to the game, because I want to talk about Matthew Judon. So we all know about Matthew Judon and his contract situation, and basically last year they gave him some of the money from this year, you know, and so he could get a bump last year. But we knew this can could only be kicked down the road so many times, and then it seemed like it was becoming kind of a sideshow, kind of a distraction, when he's having animated conversations with Drake Maye and Elliott Wolf on the sideline of practice, not wearing pads. You didn't know where he was going to be. He was owed $6.5 million. I believe all of it was non-guaranteed. So I wish they would have found some kind of resolution, but at the same time, he was traded then to the Atlanta Falcons, and the Atlanta Falcons handed the Patriots a third-round draft pick. Now, I think, Steve, you could look at it from two different ways. I think in one way, you could say, man, that's a heck of a return. A third-round draft pick, that's going to be a pretty good draft pick. Should be a top 100 draft pick, and for a rebuilding team, that's a good asset to have. And then on the other side, you could say, well, the pass rush just took a hit, and now you've lost two of your best pass rushers that can win one-on-one matchups between Christian Barmore's absence, which really has no timetable, and Matthew Judon now being gone. Now pass rush is a concern. So yeah, in one way, it certainly helps you, but another way, you lost one of your best players on your team and now made a position area much thinner than it already was, given the injury situation.
Absolutely, and I, I was making notes from my Sunday column today about this very thing because I wanted, while it was still fresh in my mind, wanted to do this. And one of the things that I wrote about was, the writer / journalist that I am can look at this and say, yeah, they may have made a good choice. Obviously, Judon doesn't fit into their long-term plans because at 32, he's probably not going to be around, when they're ready to compete again.
Yep.
And they have these young players that they believe in, guys like Keon White. Granted, Barmore's out right now, but they have him. They have some other guys that are playing that, are playing real well right now. So, I think they're looking at that saying, well, it's time to see what these young guys can do. But at the same time, I think Judon was arguably your best player on the team last year, prior to being hurt, that is.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's such a force, not only in the locker room, but on the field and, with the younger players. And, You know, he has that personality that, you know,
He just
he's
brings
just
energy.
he brings energy. He's upbeat and all that. So I'm really sorry to see him go because I really liked him as a player, and I hated to see him go. While I understand it, I don't particularly have to like it so much. But again, I think they got pretty good compensation for him,
Yep.
especially for a guy who was on his excuse me, you know, last year of his contract, and he is 32 years old. Well, he will be 32 years old.
No, I think he just
No,
turned 30.
that
He
was
just,
yesterday. Yeah,
yeah, it was the day after he was
yeah.
traded. You know, so,
Yesterday was his birthday,
yeah,
and but you know, at the same time, I hate to see him go. I think he's a great football player.
yeah. I
Now,
mean, he had
will
30. He had 32 sacks for the Patriots in his 3 years here, and how many games did he miss? Didn't he get hurt right
he
around the same
missed
time?
13 games last season?
Yeah, yeah. So
So I mean, you think about that. He had 28 sacks um,
2 years.
in the first 2 years.
Yep.
I
And then
mean,
had,
those
and
are
then
kind
had
of
four in
numbers.
the first 4 games.
And you know, he sounded like he really didn't want to go yesterday because he asked, you know, on his Twitter account, has anyone ever failed a physical for a broken heart? And I thought that was pretty telling.
I think I think it, I don't know. I go back and forth on this. I don't think I would have signed him to an extension necessarily. I think I would have, but I would have guaranteed his money and probably given him a bump. He's earned it. Now, I understand he's coming off an injury. I understand his age, but I think that there's a lot of young guys that look up to him. I think that when he's in good spirits, he helps you, you know, kind of rally the troops a little bit. And if they had got him to like 10 million guaranteed, which I understand that means you're guaranteeing the 6.5 he has and adding another 3.5 million. I think he would have played under that. I really do. And I just think it would have been worth it for the year. It now at the same time, I am happy with the asset and the return. So look, I don't think I look a lot of times I think it's kind of boring when you know, people who are on podcasts or radio or whatever, like don't just give like a definitive thing. I think you can see it from, I think this is one of those rare situations where you can understand it from both sides. But again, I'm happy with the return, not happy with the loss of the player, but you can't have both. So they made their decision. And look, at the end of the day, too, as much as, you know, Patriots fans love Matthew Judon, he wouldn't have been on the next great Patriots team. This is going to take a couple of years to kind of put together and roll. And I think that they've done a lot of good things this offseason to try to start kind of moving forward. But it's probably going to take some time. And some people might make the argument that it's already been several years. But that's what happens when you don't start the process right away and you try to salvage everything. Anyway, as far as anything else from the Matthew Judon situation you want to mention?
Well, I mean, he's going to, he's probably going to make the playoffs this year. I mean, unless they have a string of injuries. I mean,
Especially in that division.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to compete for the division now. They got Kirk Cousins and Penix, and you know, they picked up Justin Simmons yesterday as well.
Yeah, so they have him and Jesse Bates, you know, on the which is a terrific safety combo.
Now, you know, their big issue in Atlanta was the pass rush,
and that's why they drafted rookie. Was it Braylon Trice? I want to say. I'll have to double check the name, but I think it's Braylon Trice. But he tore his ACL, I believe.
And now you add Judon to the mix. I mean, I think that team is going to compete for a division championship. So he has an opportunity to, you know, play deep into the postseason this year. And I mean, good for him. It's just part of me is, like I said, I mean, I understand all the reasons, but part of me didn't want to see him go, you know?
Yeah. So they drafted rookie edge rusher Braylon Trice in the 3rd round. So let me ask you this, and we'll go to these two parts, and then we'll move on to the game. Do you think that they looked at it and said, hey, we have a chance to win the division here and compete. We just lost our rookie edge rusher. Why don't we bring in a veteran like Matthew Judon to come in? Do you think that maybe upped their offer and kind of gave Patriots a little bit more leverage?
It could possibly be because they're in a window right now of competing.
Right.
I mean, I don't think it's above the realm of possibility, like you said, to win in that division this year. And, so they're going to be right in the mix of a division win. And, if they dominate inside their own division, they could be looking at, a home game or two.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I was going to mention was there was a report, and I was trying to look it up, but it's hard to find. There was a rumor, report, whatever you want to say, that the Bears were also interested in giving their third round pick. Now, I don't know what the incentive would have been if we have all the information. I can't imagine that. I mean, maybe Elliott Wolf in the front office just think that the Falcons are going to be worse than the Bears this year, but like I can't imagine. To me, I look at it and say the Lions and the Packers are both going to be very competitive, with the Bears, even though the Bears should probably have a better season than they've had in the past. And there's a lot of reason for excitement in Chicago. It seems like that would have been the better pick when the Falcons really have, I guess, the Buccaneers in their way for their own division, but the Saints and the Panthers aren't going to be doing anything this year. So what do you think about that whole report? Do you think that's...
I did see that. And, they were talking about the Bears on Good Morning Football, which I'm glad it's back, the other day. And I forget who it was. They were saying that they think the Bears are going to push the Lions and the Vikings as well as the Packers. For most people pick the Vikings to finish fourth. Most people have either the Packers or the Lions, but one of the hosts on there, I'm trying to remember who it was. They're picking the Bears to win the division because of Caleb Williams.
Yeah, it was Phil Perry from NBC Sports Boston that said there were several teams interested in acquiring Judon, including the Bears. The Bears were considered finalists in the Judon sweepstakes alongside the Falcons, as Chicago offered the Patriots their third round pick in 2025 also. So I've met Phil. I've known him for years. Super nice guy. I don't doubt his information, but I still don't understand the logic between the two personally. So I feel like there could be a missing piece. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it was conditional or something like that.
Yeah, could have been. There had to have been some kind of qualifier, because to me it doesn't really make sense otherwise. But why don't we take a quick break here, Steve? And then when we get back, we can just spend the rest of the show talking about the Patriots' second preseason game. We'll be back right after this. All right, we're back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Havens, Steve Balestrieri. We spent the first part of the podcast talking about the joint practice with the Eagles, the Matthew Judon situation, and maybe they were looking out for Judon's situation. Yeah, maybe he didn't want to go to Chicago and he wanted to go to Atlanta. They gave him the choice. That's a good point, Todd. I still think. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a really good point. I mean, that's certainly a possibility, Todd. So we're gonna get into the game, Steve. So I'm gonna go out and say this. Sometimes preseason games are really exciting, and for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of players you want to see. The only player I was interested in watching last night was Drake Maye. I was just really looking forward to it. I thought he was the most exciting player of the night. There were some plays that were made that were good. We'll get to some of those players shortly, but Jacoby Brissett starts the game, and I really felt like the offense just was kind of stuck in the mud. They just couldn't really get something going. The offense was, the offensive line was kind of, sputtering a little bit, and then Jacoby also had that really bad interception in the end zone, which is very atypical for him, to be fair. But then Drake comes in and. Well, let's actually pause that. What were your thoughts on Jacoby Brissett's performance.
I thought he had another rough outing. I mean,
I did too.
last week, he was 0 for 3. This week he was 3 of 7 with that pick, only 17 yards passing. And like you say, that's atypical because he's usually very good at taking care of the football.
Right.
I thought he just tried to force that in there. I'm trying to think of the Eagle defense. Maddox, it was.
Yep.
I thought Maddox had great position on Hooper. And, he saw Jacoby's eyes that he was going to try to do that. And you have to give him credit right there because he jumped that and picked it off and then ran it back like 50 yards.
I also wanted to point out too that when they showed the replay, it looked like everybody was covered, and it's like, hey, if everyone's covered, then just airmail it to the back of the end zone and just take the points. You
get a field goal out of it.
Yeah, you don't go broke taking a profit. Like, you just can't turn the ball over. There was a huge swing. I know it's a huge momentum swing. I know it's preseason, but still, I mean, the point still remains. I just thought the offense looked pretty rough, and I think that he's struggled a little bit. I haven't seen him with my own eyes, but I've seen enough highlights, and I've heard enough things, I've read enough things that it seems like he's really struggling. And I thought he'd be a little bit more steady, and maybe it's just one of those things where they're still just working out the kind of cobwebs from the new offense, and he's working with new players, but he also has experience in the system as well. So he has the most experience in the system of anybody on the offense. So I don't know. I think it's been a little disappointing. I didn't expect fireworks from him. I was just hoping him to keep the offense afloat. Remember what we talked about, when they signed him? Hey, they might have won probably 2, maybe 3 more games last year with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback instead of Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, because he eliminates those turnovers and he brings a calming presence to the offense. Well, so far we haven't seen it. Early returns, it's only August 16th. Don't hit the panic button. But to me, I've been a little disappointed from that aspect.
Yeah, and part of it might have to do with, once again, the offensive line, because Brissett isn't the most mobile guy. And, with the offensive line struggles, I'm wondering if that is affecting his play.
I don't see how. I don't see how it wouldn't. I mean, disastrous.
Right. And in the game last night, I thought, for the most part, that everything was just coming off the edge. I still think the guys in the middle, and I said that last week, I thought the guys in the middle played pretty well. Not saying they were great, but they were holding up for the most part. And it was edge. And again, I mean, I go back to Vidarian Lowe.
Oh.
I know
the offensive line. You want to do the offensive line and then go to Drake Maye?
Yeah, let's do that because
they're all kind of connected.
Yeah. Okay.
Vidarian Lowe clearly, in their mind, is their best option at left tackle. I personally, and I think we've talked about this. I personally think it should go Sidy Sow, David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, and then I would put Caden Wallace at right tackle. And then I would leave Chooks Okorafor. I would put him as like this backup swing tackle. And because here's my logic is Caden Wallace, I think, has shown a couple of flashes. I know what Vidarian and I know what Chooks bring to the table. I think a lot of people would expect the Patriots to draft a left tackle early in next year's draft. So why put Caden Wallace at left tackle and put Chooks at right tackle and make Vidarian a backup when you probably are going to have to move Caden Wallace back to the right side next year, and that's rough on a guy. So put the rookie that showed promise next to your best offensive lineman, and that helps him. David Andrews can kind of help Sal, and then your left tackle is going to be a scary one. I think Terrell Jennings, the UDFA running back, has shown some good ability to to do some pass blocking. And I think that Vidarian kind of forgot that on one of the big sacks later in the game.
Was that Jennings or was that Kevin Harris?
I don't remember. I don't remember. I guess I wasn't kind of. I understand how that probably sounded. I wasn't necessarily comparing that exact same play. I was kind of intertwining thoughts. I was just making a note that Terrell Jennings to me has been impressive in the pass blocking, area. And, but that was an example of a play. That was an example of a play that, Vidarian, I think, kind of moved too far outside, and it really just kind of screwed up things. He's been their weakest link by far, and center has been a massive issue. They had another center snap exchange gone wrong. I thought it was freaking hilarious. It happened like 2 or 3 times where they showed. No, I was going to say David Andrews on the sidelines just looked like one of us, like. And for people who aren't watching, it's like just he was just standing there.
Well, that last bad snap there, I mean, it kind of just rolled back toward Bailey Zappi, and when that's happening, I mean, he dove for the ball, but it just took another weird hop, and he wasn't able to corral it. I don't blame that one on him at all. Mm-hmm. Not when it's rolled to you. I mean, they had 3 bad snaps, and Burnett was one, and then that other guy, I'm trying to remember his name now, begins with an F, but he rolled 2 bad ones, and and I know they're trying to limit David Andrews' snaps this year in a preseason. But somebody else has to step up.
Well, that's why the Jake Andrews injury was such a bummer, because he was entering his second year. They felt good about him. He was the backup center, and that would have let Leverett kind of be in the mix, but also be back and forth at guard. And I think there's a trickle down effect there. And to Todd, answer your question, I honestly have no idea.
No, I believe the answer to that is no.
Yeah, I do not believe so. So let's see here. So yeah, the offensive line is scary. It's scared to death. Drake got hit a couple of times hard, especially late, towards his later end, kind of his I don't want to call it his debut, but in his second game of action. And I tweeted it out in the third quarter, and I was like, he took a big hit, and I was like, I want Drake out there, but this might be the perfect example of why he shouldn't be out there, because he could get absolutely killed behind this offensive line.
Yep. Now, I'm curious as to, I know right now they think Vidarian Lowe is the best option that they have. So they're rolling him out there. And they gave him some help later in the game. And as you pointed out, he had the chip help on the outside, and why he deliberately offset so much to the outside, leaving a free rush, to the inside, I think was, I don't know, if it was miscommunication or just a brain cramp, but that you can't have those things. But I'm wondering if they're going to try to swing a trade before cut downs with other teams, or scour the free agent wire, after people waive their, whatever it is, 30
guys. I mean, and Calvin Anderson's looked rough too. I mean, they haven't really found an answer. They haven't really found an answer for really any of the tackle spots, which is why I say just take your medicine and roll with Caden Wallace at right tackle. I'd rather. I've been saying this since Brady left. I mean, we all have been like, just play the kids. We know it's going to be a long year. It's going to be rough. I have a hard time believing Caden Wallace is going to play worse on the right than Vidarian Lowe has played on the left so far. So I'd rather let the 3rd round pick, which people like Louis Riddick, who I respect a lot of on his opinion, is incredibly high on. So it's like, all right, we'll put him next to Onwenu. He can help him a little bit and just go with it and see what happens. And then you can just give open tryouts to left tackle and just see what happens, So I think I totally agree with you. They have to do something. They have to bring somebody in. What they have right now is not good enough, and it will totally derail. I don't care if it's Brissett or May. It's going to be an issue.
Right. And, that was the thing. Brissett struggled 2 games in a row. He struggled in the joint practice with Philly. And then Gerard Mayo came out and said today that the quarterback competition isn't over. So I'm wondering if that's just to light a fire under Brissett, or that they're looking at this. Look, he's just not mobile enough to handle things. And even though we said we were going to take our time with Drake, he gives us a better chance of being successful.
I would push back on that by saying, easy for you to say. I would push back on that by saying, if it really was a true competition, or if they had even a sliver of doubt about Brissett, then they should have given Maye more reps at this point, with the ones. Like when Maye came in last night, the only switch they made was at center, I believe. And everybody else stayed the exact same.
And then in his second series, they brought in Caden Wallace at right tackle and Robinson at right guard.
Yeah. And Robinson's been kind of interesting, by the way. So I keep an eye on that. But, to me, it's like, I just wish they had given him some more opportunity, because I'm worried it's too late now. Even if they feel like, let's say Maye and Brissett play again in the third preseason game, which I wonder if we'll see them or not. I would hope to see Maye a little bit, at the very least, see Maye for a series or two, and then let Milton and Zappi kind of run it out. That's kind of what I expect, but I don't know. I think that even though last night's performance, I don't want to overblow like what Drake Maye did last night. I thought there was a lot of really good things, but I think there were flashes that showed his talent, and it just I just think it's just going to light a fire under the fan base to put a lot of external pressure on Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo and all those guys on the coaching staff and front office, because if the team goes, if their plan is like, look, Drake Maye's not playing this year, or he might get a couple of games at the end of the year when we're totally eliminated. If they are 2-6, they're going to start hearing it. They might even hear it earlier than that. So I think that last night, I think, was a little eye-opening for some people. And again, it was only a preseason performance against a majority of backups for the Eagles. I mean, they weren't all backups, but the majority of them were. And I just think it's going to have the fan base being like, no, we'd rather just roll with the rookie, and we know what Brissett is. He can be the backup.
Yeah, and, it's a legitimate concern, because they have said, they stated, Jacoby's the guy. And now if they're rethinking that, Drake Maye has a lot of ground to catch up on in a very short amount of time.
Yep.
So, it can be done. I'm just wondering, if his athletic ability will negate some of that. And we saw that on that second drive where they scored a touchdown, where he was able to get outside. And on the touchdown itself, the Patriots, I can't remember the last time they had a quarterback as athletic as him. And, that
probably
was
Cam, but
total zone read right there, where he read the defensive end, the guy crashed down for the inside run, and he made it an easy touchdown.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll tell you right now, we talked about, everyone's been talking about that dart downfield to Baker, which was a tremendous throw, and Baker needs to bring that in. And, the other second best throw I thought was the in cut on Baker, and I have something on that in a second. But on that long pass to Baker, where he had to make a leaping grab and the ground kind of broke it up, I thought the most impressive thing on that, we knew about his arm talent, but a lot of people have been worried about his footwork and everything else like that. It wasn't a perfect pocket, and he kept his eyes downfield, stepped up, did like a little slide, and then stepped into the throw, and it was just like a 55-yard flick of the wrist dart down the field. And it was just like, wow, he had great pocket presence. He was able to kind of, manipulate around the pocket to give himself some room. He kept his eyes on, he kept his eyes down the field, and he hit his target on the money. I mean, that is, yeah, I know it was an incomplete, but to me, that was the best play of the night. And I think that's been the consensus based on for since the game ended.
Yeah, as I told you last night when we talked after the game,
Yep.
I thought that was his best throw.
Yeah,
It's an
absolutely.
incomplete pass, but and I feel bad for Baker because he went up for it. He actually hauled the ball in, but the ground broke it up,
Yeah.
and you hate to see it because I thought he made a great play there. He just couldn't hold on, when him and the ball hit the ground.
The
But
funniest line about that I heard was Andy Hart from WEEI saying, "Yeah, he told us he makes people in wheelchairs stand up. Well, they're standing up now to yell at you to tell you to catch the ball." I thought that was terrific.
I
Baker,
didn't hear that, but
yeah, Baker had a really rough night, and from what we've read, and this is why he was a fourth round pick anyway. I think that he can develop into a really good player. I think he just needs to become more consistent, and I think that, I think last night's game was a tiny bit of a reflection of that. I think he had just a kind of a rough night, but Drake had another nice pass down the left sideline, and Keely Ringo, the rookie defensive back from Georgia, kind of worked him out of bounds, which he can't let happen. Like that is kind of. He kind of ran a bad route, and then he let the cornerback kind of dominate, and Drake still put on the money, and he could have caught it. It would have been out of bounds. It looked like he still should have caught it anyway. But, so he had a bad route there. He had a great in cut, which was which was a nice third down conversion from Maye to Baker. And then he had a diving catch, which he almost hauled in. So, look, it's an inconsistent performance from him. I think that's what we're going to get from him a little bit, where we're going to see him make some big, wow splash plays and some plays where you kind of go, well, how did that happen?
absolutely. And that's what preseason's for. These guys are rookies. They're still learning their offense here, with the Patriots, and things. They have a long way to go. And we figured that we've been talking about this. It's going to take probably a good month of the season until they start finding, the sweet spots for all of these guys. And, that's why, you need to be patient, folks.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people were online last night and they were getting very impatient. It's a rebuild. They have a bunch of new players, all new coaches, staff, a whole new offense, whole new language. It doesn't happen overnight.
No, not at all. I'm trying to think on offense. I thought Jermichael Hasty had some nice plays. He had a nice catch. He had a good run. I thought that, Ramondre really couldn't do anything, man. Even the Eagles defensive, front seven, their backups are still stout. So that was, a little disappointed that Ramondre couldn't get too much going. But he does look good, though. Apparently he's lost a little fat, added a little muscle. He looked quick. So that was good to see. I would have liked to see Polk get more involved. I know he had that little joystick, double juke thing for 6 yards, the best 6 yard play in NFL preseason history. I was cracking up because, NFL Network's posting it, NFL.com, and I'm just like, guys, I mean, it was cool, but it wasn't highlight. I'm not sure it was a big highlight, but maybe I'm just in the wrong for that. I want to get into the defense. Before we turn the page to that, any other final thoughts on offense, or just do you want to turn?
No, I just I think it's obvious they need a left tackle.
Yes,
we know
they
that.
need if they could bring in even just a C+ left tackle, just give me something. Right now it's barely at NFL status. It's really bad. So they need to figure something out on the left tackle side. So that'll be something to watch, because it was 21 days till opening night yesterday. We're recording this August 16th. So we're about 20 days out. So yeah, I mean, it's coming. Cut downs are coming. So it's going to be interesting. But anyways, defensively, Steve, I thought Joshua Bledsoe, our boy, played pretty well last night. I thought that, there was a couple of different starters or some players that got a couple of reps early, but really not much. Keon White, I thought, flashed at times. He's certainly going to have more of an elevated role with the Judon situation, and just kind of what they had. I thought it was interesting that Joshua Uche played so late into the game. I've heard two differing theories on this. One was because he got into the fight, and Mayo said that if you get into a fight, you're going to play more. The other one, he didn't play the whole game, but he played into the second quarter or second half. But the other thing was that he hasn't really practiced a whole lot, so maybe he was just trying to get him extra reps. So let's start with just a couple of those things. I have a few others, and I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, I thought the best player on defense last night was Raekwon McMillan.
He was great.
He was flying all over the field, and he was laying the lumber on people. I mean, he wasn't – those weren't Olay tackles. I mean, he was making some contact. And it's nice because –
hoping he stays healthy.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was just going to say. I mean, for a guy who's had 2 season-ending, injuries in 3 years, to see him healthy and what he can do out there and flying around the field, I thought that was really good. Now, I mean, we knew Bill Belichick always liked him. Now you can see why, because he's healthy and, he's showing he can do a lot of different things.
Yeah,
I think they even played him at the edge a couple of times just to bring some added pass rush. But he was flying all over the field. I really liked what I saw from him. Some of the younger corners I thought held up real well.
Yeah, I thought Isaiah Bolden made a couple of plays. I thought Jalen Hawkins, even though he's a safety, made a couple of plays. Marco Wilson flashed. Alex Austin flashed. They all gave up plays too, but they're competitive in certain areas. I'd be curious to see. I'm fascinated to see what they do with the secondary and how they kind of make certain alignments and different formations and I'll just be really curious to see. I could see them doing 3 safety sets. I'm really curious to see who the boundary corner is going to be opposite Christian Gonzalez. Are they going to put Marcus Jones in the slot and John Jones outside? Are they going to let Marcus play like the dime corner and mostly be a returner and put John Jones in the slot and put either Marco Wilson or Isaiah Bolden or Alex Austin on the outside? I don't know what they're going to do, but they have some options. I'm not saying they're all great options, but they all have shown some kind of promise, I think, Steve.
Yeah, and I think it may depend on the week's opponent too.
Yep.
You're playing a certain team like Miami, then you want John Jones outside on Tyreek Hill.
Sure.
Maybe if they're playing a team with bigger wide receivers, maybe you want a guy like Austin or Bolden out there.
Sure.
So,
and from what I've heard, Marco Wilson has earned and played really, really well out of a lot of those guys. He's played, I think on balance the best from, everything I've read and people I've talked to who cover the team and have, been down there. So I think it'll be fascinating to see, how they, make those decisions, and again, I mean, I think they're going to run a lot of safeties and kind of move them around. And I'll be fascinated to see if that factors into the cornerback position too, because again, someone like Josh Bledsoe, something we've been talking about since he was drafted, I think he looked really good last night, but Jalen Hawkins has also been playing pretty well, and you can only play so many safeties.
Yeah.
So,
I thought, Bledsoe probably had his best work in a Patriot uniform last night. But like you said, I think Jalen Hawkins has been doing it all summer. He looked good. And even in a smaller, slice of things, I thought Pettis looked pretty good last night.
Yeah, he made a couple plays.
Yeah. So, having too many secondary guys is a good problem to have.
Yeah, especially because a lot of them are pretty young. So it's like, hey,
those are first world problems.
Yeah, exactly. I would say Jeremiah Farms, showed up a little bit last night for sure. Made some more plays. He looks like he's definitely making the team. Um,
Yeah.
so he's I would put him. I basically would put him as a lock right now. I also thought Dietrich Wise had a pretty good game, especially towards the end.
Yep. Yeah. And, overall, I thought the defense played great last night. Again, I mean, they held Philly to 6 points until, the last drive, second to last drive, but, 4 minutes to go in the game, they scored that touchdown and got the 2 points.
So real quick, because I have one more thing on the defense, but before we do that, you just reminded me something. So the Eagles scored 3 points in the first quarter, and then they went 0 for until the fourth quarter where they scored 11 points. They put their quarterback, Tanner McKee, who honestly was probably the best quarterback on the field last night. He looked really good, 15 and 19 for 140. And I thought it was hilarious that Sirianni was losing. And he goes, you know what? I'm putting McKee back in. He put McKee back in. And they have that drive. And I was like, I can't decide if that was like a petty thing or like, no, we're not going to let you win this thing. We're going to come back. And now we're going to put our foot on the gas again.
Well, he was asked about that after the game.
Yeah.
And
I didn't hear his answer.
Yeah. And they asked him, well, you took him out, then you put him back in. And, he kind of just sloughed it off. Well, we wanted to get him some extra work.
Yeah.
So
sure he did.
But yeah, I mean, he looked great last night. He made some fantastic throws.
He had a couple of good throws like outside, like where he really had to drive them. And I was like, wow, that was pretty good throw. Pretty good throw.
Yeah. He had several of those.
Yeah.
And, I know Kenny Pickett was a starter with the Steelers, but, other than his checkdowns, he had no time to throw at all in the first half.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to what I was going to bring up, which was the Patriots blitzed a lot last night, and they did a lot in the first game too. So I find it pretty interesting how aggressive they've been defensively, and I wonder if it's any indication of how Covington and Mayo are going to coach the defense, or if it's, I don't know. I've been trying to think about it because I don't know if they're thinking like, hey, we don't have, some elite pass rushers up here. So what we need to do is we need to generate some pressure so our back end is covered. And we know how Gerard Mayo and Covington are more aggressive anyway. But we also know they have some Belichick philosophies to them as well. So what do you think about them blitzing so much in preseason? And do you think that will translate at all into the regular season?
I think it will. I think they're going to be more aggressive, especially without Barmore now and without Judon. They're going to have to manufacture, and scheme up some things so that, their pass rush can get home. And, they have some more athletic guys now on the defense. And, they can bring pressure from just about anywhere. And they've shown it. They had, some corner blitzes, some safety blitzes, linebacker blitzes from inside and outside. So, I think they're planning on keeping other teams guessing this year.
Yeah, I think they have to spin the dial a bit because they need that defense. They need the special teams to get back into form because it was terrible last year. They need the defense to, I don't want to say carry the offense, but they certainly need to kind of help prop them up a bit because they can't let the offense, just struggle, and they're going to have to keep those points down in order to let the offense kind of work out kinks, because it's going to take a little while, I think, for the offense to kind of get moving. And I'm really hoping with these procedural penalties, we saw some more last night. I'm really hoping that we, can kind of get that cleaned up between the bad snaps and the false starts and, all that. It's just been way too many. So that's a big concern. But moving to special teams, Steve, I thought Joey Sly had a good night, kicked 2 pretty long field goals. Chad Ryland had 1 extra point, and it looked like he was ready to kick on that last drive. Yeah. Now, there's been 2 schools of thought that I've heard, and I don't know what you think about this. Some people think that they were just alternating. It was Sly, Ryland, Sly, and then Ryland was up again. That's just kind of how it worked. And then some people thought that they were going to put either Ryland in that position to, see how he handles the pressure of a game-winning kick potentially. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely looked like he was warming up to go. I didn't see Joey Sly warming up. And you're right. I thought Sly made 2 good field goals.
Dude is jacked.
Yeah. He doesn't look like a kicker.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And then, Ryland hit the extra point, which they did that last week too. So I'm wondering what's, the plan moving forward for that. I mean, in that last preseason game, is Ryland going to get a chance to make a field goal and, slide to the extra points? We'll see. But
I wonder if I think if I had to pick right now, I think they're going to go with Sly. And then I think they're going to try to sneak Ryland onto the practice squad.
That could be.
And Bryce Behringer had that killer 64-yard punt, pretty much textbook.
Yeah, go out bombs at like the 1 yard line.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I thought overall he had a pretty great night.
Yeah, he had that one where he went way too deep into the end zone, but on balance, I thought he had a pretty good night. So that would be nice to have. They're going to need to flip that field.
And they had another nice return on special teams.
Yeah, so you want to talk about David Wallace? Is that what we're going to get into?
Yeah, David Wallace had another big return. I think it was 53 yards.
Yeah.
A 53-yard, kickoff return. That's been one of the biggest kickoff returns I've seen in the preseason so far.
Yeah. I do still think that Marcus Jones and I think they'll probably try to take Wallace to the practice squad too, but I still think Marcus Jones and Rager are going to be your return guys.
Could very well be, but he's been producing out there.
He has been,
and he definitely misjudged that punt later on, where he was moving forward and then he had to run backwards and he muffed it. He was able to recover it, but that's just one. You have to chalk up one to. Hey, you get that one error like that, and they were talking about it on the telecast last night that, Troy Brown always taught the guys, you come forward on it so you have a running head start. And, that's what he needs to be doing. But overall, he's had some solid returns. So, he's definitely not hurting his stock. Certainly. I would like to see Marcus Jones get back out on the field and.
Yeah, I think they're keeping him in bubble wrap until the regular season. It feels like.
Yeah, and we don't know what their scheme is going to be. No one has shown their scheme. Running back, that was just a good play because there was a crack in the Eagles' wall, and he was able to recognize that, and he ran through that gap. And was able to get outside and made some really nice yardage there. But, it's going to be interesting. I think the kickoffs, for the most part, in preseason have been boring. But I don't think it's going to be that way once the season starts.
While we're on the topic of special teams, before we go to final thoughts, Jeremy Springer lived up to they showed him several times, lived up to his fieriness. He was all fired up multiple times between Wallace and Sly and and Behringer, and he was just freaking out. And I was like, man, this guy is just a ball of energy. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah. You love to see that. I mean, especially on special teams, guys.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So final thoughts from you, Steve. What are your final thoughts?
Quick final thoughts. I mean, it's a preseason game. They still have a long way to go. I like what I'm seeing from the defense. But I was encouraged a little bit by special teams, because they were so awful last year.
Right.
And we saw a nice return. We saw some great punting, and I thought their coverage was pretty good, and they were laying some lumber on people. I think the offense has shown little bits of flashes, some potential there. And I'm just encouraged, by Drake Maye. It wasn't great, but, I was just encouraged, just those little glimpses that we saw of his talent. I think we're going to see more of that coming up.
Yeah, and then we have the final preseason game at the Washington Commanders, and it's not till next Sunday. So the guys have 9 days off, and that's going to be interesting because final roster cuts, I believe, is 4 p.m. on Tuesday, August 27th, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to be right after that game. So there'll be a lot to talk about. I'm sure we'll have some kind of conversation prior to the game. I'm not sure what. There's always something. But we'll certainly be talking.
Do.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Well, I meant from a show perspective, not just you and I on the phone BSing with each other. But I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to checking out that next preseason game and seeing how they handle it. New regime, so I'll be curious to see what they do, especially with it being on a Sunday. Getting a little closer to the regular season as we kind of go along here, because that will be they'll have about 11 days. They have 9 days, one more preseason game, and then 11 days until their first game of the season. So thanks, Todd. Thanks for listening. But anyway, so my final thoughts. I'm just looking forward to seeing how they kind of handle this last stretch here and what decisions they make on the roster, and I think it will be telling based on what their kind of philosophy is going to be. And I'll be curious. I have a feeling. I think that when we talked about your roster prediction and we were kind of going back and forth, I didn't really argue too much with it. Obviously, there's a couple things that have changed since then, so maybe we can discuss doing one of those this coming week, since we have, 9 days to kill. But maybe we'll do that this week. We can do another roster projection, so I think that would be fun. But, for now, for Steve Balestrieri, I'm Derek Havens. I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. Please do not forget to subscribe to us on our YouTube and Apple YouTube channel, and download our podcasts with Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.